Nomi arrives at a secluded farm for a simple job, but when the brooding owner sees something in her no one else ever has, everything changes. A battle for love, land, and legacy is about to begin. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Rain pounded against the windshield of Nomi Vargas's old sedan as she drove slowly down the winding country road. Her wipers squeaked with each swipe, barely keeping up with the downpour. The GPS on her phone showed she was close to Willow Haven Farm, but her stomach knotted with each passing mile. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "It's just a job interview. The worst they can say is no," but Nomi knew rejection all too well. At 26, her life felt like a series of closed doors and missed opportunities. No college degree, no career, just a string of odd jobs that barely paid the bills. When she spotted the wooden sign for Willow Haven Farm, her breath caught in her throat. The property was even more beautiful than the pictures online. Rolling green hills, white fences, and a sprawling farmhouse that looked like something from a magazine. "This is a mistake," she muttered as she pulled into the gravel driveway. "They'll take one look at me and know I don't belong here." She parked and stared at her resume, the edges already damp from the rain. It wasn't impressive. Housekeeping at a motel, kitchen help at a diner, some volunteer work at an animal shelter. Nothing that screamed, "Hire me," for a place this nice. With a deep breath, Nomi stepped out of her car into the rain. By the time she reached the covered porch of the main house, her dark hair was plastered to her face, and her only decent blouse clung uncomfortably to her skin. Before she could knock, the door swung open. A tall man with broad shoulders stood. In the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You must be Nomi," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I'm Silas Grant. Come in before you drown out there." Nomi stepped inside, immediately feeling out of place in the warm, tastefully decorated entryway. Everything looked expensive, but not flashy. She clutched her wet resume tighter. "I'm sorry about the rain," she said, trying to smooth her hair. "I must look terrible." Silas didn't smile, but his eyes, a clear, striking blue, softened slightly. "There's a towel in the bathroom down the hall if you want to dry off." After a quick trip to the bathroom, Nomi felt marginally better. Her resume was beyond saving, though. The ink had smudged into blue blotches across the page. When she returned to the living room, Silas was waiting with 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her without asking if she wanted it. "So," he said, settling into an armchair and gesturing for her to take the sofa, "tell me why you're interested in working at Willow Haven." Nomi's hands trembled around the warm mug. "I saw your listing online. You needed help with cleaning, cooking, taking care of animals. I've done all those things before. I know, I read your application." Silas took a sip of his coffee. "But why here? There are plenty of jobs in town." The question caught her off guard. Most employers just wanted to know if she could do the work, and how little they could pay her. I like it out here," she said finally. "It's peaceful and I love animals." Silas studied her for a long moment. Up close, Nomi could see the sun lines around his eyes, the calluses on his hands. He wasn't just some rich guy playing farmer. He worked this land. "The position includes room and board," he said. "There's a guest house about 100 yards. From the main house, it's small, but it's private." Oh, Nomi hadn't realized housing was included. That would change everything. Her current apartment ate half her paycheck each month. "That's very generous," Silas shrugged. "It's practical. The farm needs attention at odd hours. Having someone on site makes sense." He stood up and walked to the large windows overlooking the property. Rain still fell steadily, casting everything in a grey haze. "I should tell you," Nomi said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I'm not really qualified. I mean, I can do the work, but I didn't finish school. I've never had a real title. I've been told I'm not—" She faltered, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Good enough." Silas turned from the window, his expression serious. For a long moment he said nothing, just studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. Then he walked back and sat down across from her. "You're wrong," he said simply. Nomi blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "You're wrong." His voice was quiet but firm. "From what I can see, you're not just good enough for the job. You're too good for me." The words hung in the air between them. Nomi felt her cheeks flush. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. "I don't understand," she managed to say. Silas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This farm needs someone who cares, Nomi, not just someone who can do tasks. I've interviewed 5 people this week, all with fancy degrees and impressive resumes. None of them looked at this place the way you did when you drove up. How did I look at it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips, like it mattered, like it was worth something. Before Nomi could respond, the front door opened, and an older woman bustled in, shaking rain from an umbrella. "Lord have mercy, it's coming down out there." The woman spotted Nomi and broke into a warm smile. "Well, hello there. You must be another applicant. I'm Martha. I help out with the house once a week." "This is Nomi Vargas," Silas said, standing. "Our new farm assistant." Nomi's eyes widened in surprise. "I am?" Silas nodded. "If you want the job, it's yours. You can start tomorrow," Martha beamed. "Oh, that's wonderful news. It's about time this place had a woman's touch again." She turned to Nomi. "Don't let his serious face fool you, honey. Silas is a good man, just keeps to himself too much." Silas cleared his throat. "Martha, could you show Nomi the guest house while I make some calls?" "Of course, come along, dear, you'll love it. It's small but charming. Silas fixed it up himself last summer." As Martha led her outside under a large umbrella, Nomi felt like she was dreaming. Everything was happening so fast. "He doesn't usually make decisions this quickly," Martha said as they walked down a stone path toward a small cottage. "You must have made quite an impression." "I don't know why," Nomi admitted. "I didn't even have a proper resume," Martha chuckled. "Silas doesn't care about papers, he cares about people, or at least he used to." "What do you mean?" Martha's cheerful expression dimmed slightly. "Well, it's not my place to gossip, but since you'll be living here, Silas wasn't always so closed off. After his father passed 5 years ago, he took over the farm, modernized everything, made it more successful than it had ever been. The locals started calling him the young millionaire farmer. Then there was Caroline." "Caroline?" "His fiancée." Martha shook her head. "City girl, all flash and no substance. She liked his money but laughed at his work. Called this place quaint, like it was a bad word. When she left him 3 years ago, something in Silas just shut down." They reached the guest house, a charming stone cottage with a small porch. Inside it was simple but beautiful. One main room with a kitchenette, a bedroom, and a bathroom. Everything was clean and well maintained. "It's perfect," Nomi said, running her hand over the smooth wooden counter. "The fridge is stocked with basics," Martha said. "Silas never does anything halfway. If you need anything else, just let him." "No." That night after Martha left and Nomi returned to town to pack her few belongings, she sat alone in her apartment, still stunned by the day's events. "Oh, you're too good for me," Silas had said. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. For the first time in years, Nomi felt something dangerous stir inside her heart. Hope. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the previous day's storm had washed everything clean. Nomi arrived at Willow Haven Farm early, her car packed with everything she owned, which wasn't much: some clothes, a few books, and an old photo album. Silas was already outside, feeding the horses in the stable. He wore faded jeans and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms tanned from outdoor work. "Good morning," Nomi called, suddenly nervous again. Silas looked up and nodded. "You're early." "That's good." He helped her carry her things to the guest house, though he didn't say much. Up close in the morning light, Nomi noticed the faint shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well. "I thought we'd start with a tour of the property," he said once they'd brought everything inside. "So, you know what you're getting into?" Willow Haven Farm was larger than Nomi had realized. Nearly 200 acres with fields of wheat and corn, an apple orchard, vegetable gardens, and pastures for horses and cattle. The main barn housed state-of-the-art equipment that Silas explained with quiet pride. "My father ran this place the old way," he said as they walked through rows of apple trees. "Worked himself to death doing it. When I took over, I invested in technology, better irrigation, sustainable methods. People said I was crazy to put so much money into a family farm. But it worked, Nomi said, noticing how healthy everything looked. A brief smile touched his lips. Yes, it worked. By midday, Nomi's head was spinning with information, feeding schedules, equipment operation, seasonal rotations. Silas was thorough but patient, answering her questions without making her feel stupid for asking. They ate lunch on the porch of the main house, sandwiches Silas had prepared that morning. Nomi noticed he kept the house spotless, everything, in its place. "So what exactly will I be doing?" she asked between bites. "Whatever needs doing," Silas replied. "Cleaning, cooking if you want, helping with the animals. I have farmhands who come in for the heavy field work, but there's always more to do than hours in the day. And what about you? What do you do when you're not farming?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a moment before answering. "This farm is what I do. It's what I am." There was something in his voice, a hint of defiance, as if he'd had to defend this choice before. Nomi thought about what Martha had said about Caroline, the fiancée who had mocked his simple life. "It's a beautiful place," she said simply. "You should be proud." Silas looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. "Thank you." The next few days fell into a rhythm. Nomi woke early, made coffee, and helped with morning chores. She cleaned the main house, learned to collect eggs from the temperamental hens, and slowly began to find her place in the daily life of Willow Haven. Silas remained somewhat distant, but always polite. He worked from dawn until dusk, moving with purpose through his tasks. Occasionally, Nomi would catch him watching her, his expression unreadable. One morning, about a week after she started, Nomi discovered a sick calf in the small barn. The poor thing was lying on its side, breathing heavily. Without thinking, she ran to the main house and found Silas in his office, reviewing invoices. "There's a sick calf in the barn," she said breathlessly. "I think it might be serious." Silas immediately called the vet, but they wouldn't be able to come until afternoon. In the meantime, he showed Nomi how to check the calf's temperature and prepare a mixture of electrolytes. "We need to keep him hydrated," he explained, filling a large syringe with the liquid. "Can you hold his head?" Nomi sat on the straw beside the calf, gently cradling its head in her lap while Silas administered the electrolytes. The animal was weak but calm under her touch. "You're good with him," Silas remarked, watching as she stroked the calf's neck. "I've always connected better with animals than people," she admitted. "They don't judge you for your mistakes." Silas's eyes met hers for a brief moment. Some people do the same. Throughout the day, they took turns sitting with the calf. Nomi brought blankets from her cottage and made a more comfortable bed in the straw. She talked softly to the animal, telling him stories as if he were a child. When the vet finally arrived and diagnosed a treatable infection, Nomi felt as relieved as if it had been her own pet. The vet left medication and instructions, assuring them the calf would recover with proper care. That evening, as dusk settled over the farm, Silas found Nomi still in the barn, checking on the calf one last time. "You should get some rest," he said from the doorway. "You've been in here all day." "I just wanted to make sure he was comfortable for the night." She stood up, brushing straw from her jeans. "You didn't have to do all this," Silas said, gesturing to the makeshift bed she'd created, the water bucket placed just within the calf's reach. "I wanted to." In the dim light of the barn, something shifted in Silas's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his usually tense shoulders. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Not everyone would care this much." As they walked back toward their respective houses, the first stars appearing in the twilight sky, Nomi felt a strange contentment settle over her. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. What she didn't see was the way Silas glanced back at her as they parted ways, a look of curiosity and something deeper crossing his face before he turned toward the empty rooms of his house. Days turned into weeks, and September gave way to October. The farm glowed with autumn colors, golden wheat fields, crimson apple orchards, pumpkins ripening in the garden. Nomi settled into her role, growing more confident each day. Every morning, she rose before dawn and prepared coffee in her cottage. She always made enough for 2 cups, one for herself and one for Silas, which she would bring to the main house when she arrived to start her day. She didn't realize he had noticed this habit until one rainy morning when she entered the kitchen to find him already there. 2 mugs waiting on the counter. "I thought I'd save you the trouble today," he said, sliding one toward her. The simple gesture touched her more than it should have. "Thank you." As they drank their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the rain through the kitchen window, Nomi realized how much had changed in a month. She no longer felt like an outsider here. The farm had begun to feel like home. Silas still kept to himself, but the wall between them had lowered slightly. He spoke more freely about the farm's operations, sometimes even sharing stories about growing up there. Nomi treasured these glimpses into his life, storing them away like precious gifts. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Nomi stood on the small porch of her cottage, mesmerized by the view. The beauty of this place still took her breath away sometimes. She didn't hear Silas approach until he spoke. "It never gets old, does it?" he said, coming to stand beside her. Nomi shook her head. "Never. I keep thinking I should get used to it, but I don't think that's possible." Silas leaned against the porch railing, his profile outlined in the fading light. "My father used to say that only a fool gets used to beauty." He sounds wise. He was. Silas was quiet for a moment. "I wish he could see the farm now. He worked so hard, but the old methods were killing him. He was too stubborn to change." "But you weren't," Nomi said softly. "No. I knew there had to be a better way. When I inherited the farm, people thought I'd sell it and move to the city. That's what Caroline wanted." It was the first time he'd mentioned his ex-fiancée by name. Nomi felt a twinge of curiosity but didn't push. "Why didn't you?" she asked instead. Silas turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "Because this land has been in my family for 4 generations. It's not just dirt and crops. It's history. It's purpose." The conviction in his voice stirred something in Nomi's heart. She understood what it meant to search for purpose, to yearn for roots. "I've never had anything like that," she admitted. "Something that connects me to the past or the future. I've just been drifting." And now, the question hung between them, loaded with meaning Nomi wasn't ready to examine too closely. "Now I'm here," she said simply. "And that's enough for today." Silas nodded as if her answer satisfied him. "I came to tell you Martha called. She can't make it tomorrow to help with the deep cleaning. If it's too much for you to handle alone, I can reschedule the supplier meeting and help." "No, don't do that. I can manage." "You're sure?" "Positive," Nomi smiled. "I'm stronger than I look." Something flickered in Silas's eyes. "I've never doubted that." The next day, Nomi tackled the deep cleaning of the main house with determination. She scrubbed floors, washed windows, and polished furniture until everything gleamed. The work was hard but satisfying. In the kitchen, she decided to surprise Silas with a home-cooked meal. Her grandmother had taught her to cook traditional Mexican dishes, and though Nomi had few memories of her family, these recipes remained a connection to her past. By the time Silas returned from his meetings in town, the house smelled of simmering spices and fresh-baked bread. He paused in the doorway of the kitchen, surprise evident on his face. "You didn't have to cook," he said, setting down his briefcase. "I wanted to." Nomi wiped her hands on a towel. "Consider it a thank you for giving me a chance here." They ate, at the kitchen table instead of the formal dining room, sharing a meal that felt more intimate than Nomi had intended. Silas complimented her cooking repeatedly, eating with an enthusiasm that made her cheeks warm with pleasure. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked, as he helped himself to seconds. "My grandmother before she passed. These are her recipes." "She taught you well." Silas hesitated, then asked, "What about the rest of your family?" Nomi's smile faltered slightly. "There isn't any. My parents died when I was 14, car accident. I went into foster care after that, but I aged out of the system at 18. "I'm sorry," Silas said, his voice genuinely regretful. "I shouldn't have asked." "It's okay." "It was a long time ago." Nomi busied herself with clearing plates. "What about your mother? You never mention her." "She left when I was 10. decided farm life wasn't for her. His tone was matter-of-fact, but Nomi could hear the old hurt beneath the words. She lives in California now, sends a Christmas card every year. That must have been hard. Silas shrugged. My father was enough. He taught me everything important. As they washed dishes together afterward, Nomi was acutely aware of Silas's presence beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne, the careful way he handled her grandmother's recipes when she asked him to put them away. There was a gentleness to him that contradicted his stern exterior. Later that night, alone in her cottage, Nomi found herself thinking about Silas more than she should. About his hands, strong but careful. About the rare moments when he smiled and his entire face transformed. About the quiet conviction in his voice when he spoke of the land. This is dangerous, she whispered to herself in the darkness. Getting attached to this place, to him, would only lead to disappointment. People like Silas didn't end up with people like her. She'd learned that lesson too many times before, but as she drifted off to sleep, the memory of his eyes in the sunset lingered, and the dangerous feeling of hope grew stronger in her heart. What she didn't know was that in the main house, Silas sat at his desk long after midnight, pretending to work, but actually thinking about the way Nomi looked at his farm. Like it was something precious. The way she cared for everything and everyone around her. The way she made this big house feel less empty for the first time in years, and for the first time since Caroline had walked away, laughing at his simple dreams, Silas felt something stir inside him that he'd thought was dead forever. But old. Fears die hard, and by morning his walls were firmly back in place. After all, what could he possibly offer someone like Nomi, whose gentle heart deserved far more than his guarded one? November arrived at Willowhaven Farm with frosty mornings and early sunsets. The trees stood bare against the grey sky, and a quiet hush fell over the land as nature prepared for winter. Nomi had been working at the farm for nearly 2 months. Now and each day she felt more at home. One cold morning she was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard a crash from the living room, followed by a muffled curse. She rushed in to find Silas holding his hand, blood seeping between his fingers. A broken coffee mug lay scattered on the floor. What happened? She asked, immediately grabbing a clean kitchen towel. It's nothing, Silas said, wincing as she took his hand and wrapped the towel around it. The mug handle broke. Let me see. Nomi gently unwrapped the towel. The cut was deep across his palm. This needs stitches. I don't have time for that. The feed delivery is coming this morning. Nomi gave him a stern look. The delivery can wait. You're bleeding all over your clean floor. To her surprise, Silas didn't argue further. He allowed her to lead him to his truck and drive him to the urgent care clinic in town. In the waiting room, he sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable. You didn't have to come in with me, he said. You could have dropped me off and leave you to drive home one-handed. Not a chance. Nomi flipped through a magazine, not really reading it. Besides, who would make sure you actually got the stitches instead of just slapping a bandage on it and calling it good? A ghost. Of a smile touched Silas's lips. You think you know me that well already? I know enough. The doctor confirmed the cut needed 7 stitches. Silas didn't flinch during the procedure, but Nomi noticed how tightly he gripped the edge of the exam table with his good hand. On the drive back to the farm, snow began to fall, light flurries that danced in the air before disappearing on the windshield. First snow of the season, Nomi remarked. Silas stared out the window, his expression distant. My father always said the first snow was a clean slate, nature's way of starting fresh. Do you believe that? In fresh starts? He turned to look at her, his blue eyes thoughtful. I want to. Back at the farm, Nomi insisted Silas rest while she handled the feed delivery. He reluctantly agreed, settling in his office with the promise that he would only do paperwork. Later that afternoon, when Nomi brought him coffee, she found him struggling to open a bottle of pain medication with one hand. Here, let me, she said, taking the bottle. Their fingers brushed and a jolt of awareness passed through her. She quickly focused on opening the bottle, hoping he hadn't noticed her reaction. Thank you, Silas said quietly as she handed him the pills. Not just for this, for today. It's what anyone would do. No, he said firmly. It's not. The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter. For a moment, She thought he might say something more, but instead, he took the pills and turned back to his computer. "I've ordered pizza for dinner," he said, changing the subject. "Least I could do since you've been running the farm single-handed today." Pizza sounds perfect. Nomi smiled, trying to ignore the lingering warmth in her chest. That evening they ate pizza in the living room, a fire crackling in the fireplace as snow continued to fall outside. It was the most relaxed Nomi had seen Silas since she arrived. Maybe it was the pain medication, or maybe something was finally shifting between them. "Tell me something about yourself that's not on your resume," Silas said suddenly. Nomi laughed. "My resume was mostly water stains by the time you saw it." "Then tell me something I don't know." She thought for a moment. "I love thunderstorms. When I was little, my dad would sit with me on the porch during storms. He said the thunder was just the angels bowling." Silas smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "I like that." "Your turn," Nomi said. "Tell me something about Silas Grant that the locals don't know." He was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was younger. I even got accepted to school. What happened? My father got sick. Someone had to run the farm." He shrugged, as if it had been a simple choice, but Nomi could see there was more to the story. "Do you regret it? Not going?" Silas looked around the room, then out the window at his land now white with snow. "Not anymore." The simple honesty of his answer touched Nomi deeply. In that moment, she understood him better. His dedication to the farm wasn't just about duty or legacy. He truly loved this place. As the evening wound down, Nomi helped clean up despite Silas's protests that she'd done enough for one day. "Your hand needs to heal," she reminded him. "Doctor's orders." "You'd make a good doctor yourself," he said. "You have a way of getting people to listen to you." Nomi laughed. "Tell that to all my former bosses." "Their loss," Silas said, suddenly serious. "Willow Haven's gain." The words warmed her all the way back to her cottage that night. The next morning, Nomi woke to a winter wonderland. Snow had fallen heavily overnight, covering everything in a pristine blanket of white. Her cottage looked like something from a Christmas card. She bundled up and made her way to the main house, carrying coffee as usual. The farmhand's truck was already in the driveway. Jose and Miguel, who helped with the heavier farm work, were clearing the main paths. Inside, she found Silas in the kitchen, attempting to cook one-handed. "What are you doing?" she asked, setting down the coffee mugs. "Making breakfast." He gestured to a skillet where eggs were dangerously close to burning. "Or trying to." "Sit," Nomi commanded, taking the spatula from him. "I've got this." As she rescued breakfast, Silas watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she set a plate in front of him, he thanked her but seemed preoccupied. "Is something wrong?" she asked, sitting across from him with her own plate. "The county winter festival starts next week," he said. "I've been asked to judge the pie." "Contest? That sounds fun. I go every year. It's expected." He hesitated, then added, "I was wondering if you'd like to come." "Not to work," he clarified quickly. "Just to enjoy it." Nomi was surprised by the invitation. In all her time at Willow Haven, Silas had never suggested they go anywhere together that wasn't farm-related. "I'd love to," she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "Good." Silas nodded as if confirming a business arrangement, but Nomi caught the relief in his eyes. Over the next week, Silas's hand began to heal, though he was still limited in what he could do around the farm. Nomi took on extra responsibilities without complaint, often working from sunrise until well after dark. She enjoyed the challenge, proving to herself as much as to Silas that she was capable of handling whatever came her way. One evening, she was in the barn checking on the animals when Silas found her. "You should have been done hours ago," he said, concerned. "It's freezing out here. I wanted to make sure everyone was warm enough." Nomi stroked the nose of a chestnut mare. "It's supposed to drop below 0 tonight." Silas watched her with the horse, a softness in his expression that made Nomi's heart skip. "You care about everything here, don't you?" "Of course I do. This is my home now, too." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Instead of pulling away as she expected, Silas stepped closer. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." They stood. In the dim light of the barn, the silence between them charged with unspoken feelings. Nomi was acutely aware of how close he was, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cold air. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, she thought he might kiss her. But then one of the horses nickered, breaking the spell, and Silas stepped back. "We should head in," he said, his voice rough. "Early day tomorrow." As they walked back toward their separate houses, the space between them felt both too large and not large enough. The day of the winter festival dawned bright and clear. Nomi spent extra time getting ready, trying on 3 different outfits before settling on a deep blue sweater dress that Martha had helped her shop for in town. She rarely wore dresses, preferring practical clothes for farm work, but today felt special. When she emerged from her cottage, she found Silas waiting by his truck, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal grey sweater that made his blue eyes even more striking. He stared at her for a moment before speaking. "You look nice," he said, the simple compliment meaning more to Nomi than flowery praise would have from anyone else. "So do you," she replied, feeling suddenly shy. The drive to town was quiet, but comfortably so. Christmas music played softly on the radio, and Nomi watched the snow-covered countryside pass by, feeling content in a way she couldn't remember feeling before. The winter festival was held in the town square, which had been transformed into a holiday wonderland. Twinkling lights hung from every tree, vendors sold hot chocolate and roasted chestnuts, and children built snowmen in the park. As they walked through the festival, Nomi noticed how people reacted to Silas. There was respect in the way they greeted him, but also a certain distance, as if his success had created a barrier. She wondered how many of them knew the real Silas, the one who sat up all night with a sick calf, who remembered how his father liked his coffee, who quietly carried the weight of his family's legacy. "Mr. Grant?" A plump woman in a festive sweater hurried toward them. "We're so glad you could make it. The pie judging starts in an hour." "I'll be there, Mrs. Peterson," Silas assured her. "This is Nomi Vargas. She works at Willow Haven." "Lovely." "To meet you, dear." Mrs. Peterson's eyes sparkled with interest as she looked between them. "It's nice to see Silas bringing someone to the festival. He usually comes alone." After she bustled away, Silas looked slightly embarrassed. "Small towns?" he muttered. "Everyone knows everyone's business." "Or thinks they do," Nomi said with a smile. "Don't worry, I don't mind being gossip fodder." They spent the morning exploring the festival. Silas bought Nomi a cup of hot apple cider and a handmade scarf from a local vendor. When she protested that it was too expensive, he simply wrapped it around her neck. "Consider it a thank you for all the extra work you've been doing while I've been useless," he said. "You're never useless," Nomi replied, touching the soft wool of the scarf. "But thank you, it's beautiful." When it was time for the pie judging, Nomi found a seat in the audience while Silas took his place at the judges' table. She watched as he carefully tasted each entry, his expression serious as he made notes. The locals clearly valued his opinion, nodding as he explained his ratings. Afterward, as Silas was surrounded by contestants wanting to discuss his feedback, Nomi wandered toward a booth selling homemade jellies and preserves. She was examining a jar of blackberry jam when a woman's voice spoke beside her. "He's different with you." Nomi turned to see an elegant blonde woman in an expensive-looking coat watching her with curious eyes. "I'm sorry, Silas," the woman clarified. "I've known him most of my life, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Before Nomi could respond, Silas appeared at her side. "Rebecca," he said, his voice cooler than Nomi had heard it in weeks. "I didn't know you." "We're back in town." "Just for the holidays," the woman Rebecca replied. "Dad insisted, you know how he is about family traditions." "How could I forget?" There was an edge to Silas's words that made Nomi wonder about their history. Rebecca turned her attention back to Nomi. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Rebecca Anderson." "Nomi Vargas." She shook the offered hand, noting the perfect manicure and diamond tennis bracelet. "I work at Willow Haven." "So I heard." Rebecca's smile was pleasant but assessing. "The whole town's talking about Silas's new employee." The slight pause before employee wasn't lost on Nomi. She felt her cheeks warm, but kept her expression neutral. "Rebecca was just leaving," Silas said firmly. "Weren't you?" Actually, I was hoping to catch up. It's been, what, 2 years? Rebecca touched his arm lightly. You can't still be mad about Caroline. At the mention of his ex-fiancée, Silas's jaw tightened. So I'm not mad, I'm busy. You're always busy. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Fine, I know when I'm not wanted, but Dad's having his annual Christmas party next weekend. You should come, both of you, she added, glancing at Nomi. It would be interesting. After she walked away, Silas remained tense, staring after her with a troubled expression. Who was that? Nomi asked quietly. Rebecca Anderson, Caroline's cousin. Her father owns half the real estate in the county. Silas's voice was flat. She and Caroline were inseparable growing up, cut from the same cloth. She seems friendly, Silas scoffed. Rebecca doesn't have friends. She has people she can use. He shook his head as if clearing away unpleasant thoughts. Let's not let her ruin the day. There's a band playing at the gazebo. As they walked toward the music, Nomi couldn't help wondering about Caroline, the woman who had laughed at Silas's simple life, the woman who had broken his heart and closed him off to the world. The encounter with Rebecca cast a temporary shadow over their day, but as they listened to Christmas carols and watched children ice skating on the town pond, Silas gradually relaxed again. By the time they headed back to the truck, the tension had faded. Snow began to fall again as they drove home, fat flakes swirling in the headlights. Nomi leaned her head against the window, watching the winter landscape pass by. Thank you for today, she said softly. I can't remember the last time I went to something like that just for fun. Silas glanced at her, his expression softening. I'm glad you came. It was different, having you there. Different good or different bad? Good, he said without hesitation. Definitely good. When they reached the farm, Silas parked but didn't immediately get out. He sat for a moment, staring through the windshield at the snow-covered driveway. Rebecca was right about one thing, he said finally. Her father does throw a big Christmas party every year. It's the social event of the season around here. Are you going to go? Nomi asked. Silas turned to look at her, his eyes serious in the dim light. Would you come with me? Not as my employee, he added quickly. As my... He trailed off, as if unsure how to define what he was asking. Date? Nomi supplied, her heart pounding. Yes, Silas said, the word hanging between them in the quiet truck cab. My date. The moment felt pivotal, as if whatever she answered would change everything between them. Nomi thought about the warnings in her head, that people like Silas didn't end up with people like her, that she wasn't good enough, that she'd only get hurt. But then she remembered his words on that first rainy day. You're not just good enough for the job. You're too good for me. I'd like that, she said softly. Silas's relief was visible. Good. That's good. Neither of them seemed to know what to say next. After a moment, Silas cleared his throat. I should let you get inside. It's getting cold. Right. Nomi reached for the door handle, then paused. Silas? Yes? I had a really nice time today. His smile in the darkness was like a gift. So did I. As she walked to her cottage, snow crunching beneath her boots, Nomi felt as if she were walking on air. For the first time in her life, she was allowing herself to want something she'd always believed was out of reach. Hope, that dangerous feeling, now bloomed fully in her heart. The week leading up to the Anderson Christmas party was busy at Willow Haven. A pipe burst in one of the barns during a cold snap, requiring emergency repairs. Then a storm knocked out power for 2 days, forcing Silas and Nomi to move sensitive equipment and supplies to areas with generator backup. Through it all, they worked side by side, their partnership strengthening with each challenge. Silas had begun to trust Nomi with more responsibilities, valuing her input and relying on her judgment. The walls he had built around himself seemed to lower a little more each day. The night before the party, Nomi stood in her cottage, staring at her closet with dismay. She had exactly one dress appropriate for farm work and the casual winter festival, but nothing remotely suitable for a fancy Christmas party. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Martha, carrying a large box. I thought you might need some help for tomorrow night, the older woman said, smiling knowingly. The Anderson party is quite the affair. Inside the box was a stunning emerald green cocktail dress, simple but elegant, with a matching wrap and low heels. "Martha, I can't accept this," Nomi protested. "It's too much." "Nonsense. It's my daughter's. She moved to Chicago last year and left half her closet behind. It's just gathering dust." Martha held the dress up against Nomi. "It's perfect with your coloring. Try it on." The dress fit as if it had been made for her, hugging her curves without being too revealing. When Nomi looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. "Now don't you look like $1 million, Martha said, her eyes misty. "Silas won't know what hit him." Nomi blushed. "It's not like that." Martha gave her a knowing look. "Honey, I've known that boy since he was in diapers. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, not even Caroline." What was she like? Nomi couldn't help asking. "Caroline?" Martha's expression hardened slightly. "Beautiful, polished, cold as ice underneath it all." She saw Silas as a project, the rough-around-the-edges farmer she could civilize. When she realized he'd never be the society husband she wanted, she left. Broke his heart. "I'd never do that to him," Nomi said softly. "I know that, dear." Martha patted her hand. "And deep down, so does he. He just needs time to trust again." After Martha left, Nomi carefully hung the green dress in her closet. As she got ready for bed, she couldn't help wondering what tomorrow night would bring. The idea of meeting all those people, Caroline's people, made her stomach knot with anxiety. What if they looked down on her? What if they made Silas regret bringing her? "Stop it," she told her reflection firmly. "You are good enough. You belong wherever you choose to be." The words felt true in a way they never had before. The Anderson estate was a sprawling mansion on the edge of town, set back from the road behind wrought iron gates. As Silas drove through the entrance, Nomi gaped at the display. Thousands of twinkling lights covered every tree and shrub, and a massive wreath hung on the front door. "It's a bit much," Silas said, noting her expression. "It's beautiful," Nomi countered, "like something from a movie." Silas looked handsome in a dark suit and tie, his usual ruggedness tempered but not hidden by the formal attire. When he had first seen Nomi in the green dress, he had stared for so long that she'd asked if something was wrong. "Nothing's wrong," he'd said, his voice husky. "You're just beautiful." Now, as they walked toward the front door, Nomi felt his hand at the small of her back, a gentle, protective gesture that steadied her nerves. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. A 20-foot Christmas tree dominated the foyer, and waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. People in expensive clothes clustered in groups, their laughter sounding practiced to Nomi's ears. "Silas Grant," a booming voice called, from across the room. A large man with silver hair approached, clapping Silas on the shoulder. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." "Mr. Anderson." Silas shook the man's hand. "Thank you for the invitation." "And who is this lovely young lady?" Mr. Anderson turned his attention to Nomi, his assessment barely concealed behind a practiced smile. "This is Nomi Vargas," Silas said, a note of pride in his voice that made Nomi's heart swell. "Nomi, this is Harold Anderson, Rebecca's father." "A pleasure, my dear." Harold kissed her hand with old-fashioned courtesy. "Any friend of Silas's is welcome here." As the evening progressed, Nomi met more people than she could possibly remember. Some were polite, others barely concealed their curiosity about Silas's date. She caught snippets of whispered conversations. "Works. On his farm, I heard. Nothing like Caroline. Wonder if it's serious." Silas stayed close to her side, his protective presence a comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. When the band began to play, he surprised her by leading her. "To the dance floor. I didn't know you danced," she said as he took her in his arms. "My mother insisted on lessons when I was young," he replied. "One of the few useful things she left me with." As they moved together to the music, the rest of the party seemed to fade away. Nomi was acutely aware of Silas's hand on her waist, the slight roughness of his palm against hers, the way his eyes never left her face. "Everyone's watching us," she murmured. "Let them watch." Silas pulled her slightly closer. "I don't care what they think." But Nomi knew that wasn't entirely true. He did care even if he didn't want to. This was his community, his father's friends, people he'd known all his life. Their opinion mattered, whether he admitted it or not. After the dance, Silas excused himself to speak with an elderly man Nomi recognized as the county commissioner. Left alone for the first time that evening, she wandered toward the refreshment table, grateful for a moment to catch her breath. "So you're the famous Nomi." She turned to find Rebecca Anderson watching her, a champagne flute dangling from her manicured fingers. "I don't know about famous," Nomi said carefully. "In this town, anyone Silas Grant shows interest in becomes instantly famous." Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes, especially after the Caroline debacle. "I'm not Caroline," Nomi said quietly but firmly. "No, you certainly aren't." Rebecca looked her up and down. "That's what makes this so interesting. Silas could have anyone, you know. Women have been throwing themselves at him for years. The handsome, wealthy farmer who just needs the right woman to melt his frozen heart." The dismissive tone made Nomi's spine stiffen. "Silas isn't a character in a romance novel. He's a real person with real feelings." "Feelings he's suddenly developed for his live-in help?" Rebecca raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "You have to admit it looks a bit convenient." Nomi felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, another woman joined them. Blonde, elegant, with a cold beauty that made Nomi's stomach drop. "Rebecca, darling, you promised to introduce me to everyone, and here you are, hoarding the most interesting guest all to yourself." The woman extended her hand to Nomi. "I'm Caroline Taylor. I believe you know my ex-fiancé." Nomi felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. This was Caroline. But she was supposed to be back east somewhere. Not here. Not tonight. "Nomi." "Vargas," she managed to say, shaking the offered hand. "Nomi works for Silas," Rebecca supplied, a slight emphasis on works that made the statement sound tawdry. How fascinating. Caroline's smile was like a shark's. "And what exactly do you do at Willow Haven?" "Whatever needs doing," Nomi replied, echoing Silas's words from her first day. "The farm is a lot of work." "Oh, I remember." Caroline laughed lightly. "All those early mornings and dirty boots. Not exactly the lifestyle I had in mind." "It's not for everyone," Nomi agreed, finding her voice. "It takes a special kind of dedication." Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly at the implied criticism. "Well, I'm sure you're very dedicated. Where exactly did you work before Willow Haven?" The question was designed to put Nomi in her place, to remind her of the vast social gap between them. Before she could answer, she felt a warm presence at her side. "Nomi worked at the animal shelter in town," Silas said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of steel. "That's where I first noticed her way with animals. She has a gift." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a public declaration that left no room for misinterpretation. Caroline's perfect composure faltered for just a second. "Silas, I was just getting to know your date." "I'm sure you were." His tone made it clear he knew exactly what had been happening. "If you'll excuse us, I promised Nomi a tour of Harold's greenhouse. He's quite proud of his orchids." As he led her away, Nomi felt a mix of emotions: gratitude for his rescue, pride in how he'd stood up for her, and a gnawing insecurity that Caroline's presence had awakened. In the relative privacy of the greenhouse, warm and humid among the exotic flowers, Silas turned to her. "I'm sorry about that," he said, his expression troubled. "I had no idea Caroline would be here. She's supposed to be in Boston." "It's okay," Nomi assured him, though her heart still raced. "She has every right to be here. She and Rebecca are family. That doesn't give her the right to make you uncomfortable." Silas ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing important." Nomi didn't want to repeat Caroline's insinuations. "Just getting to know the competition, I think." Silas's expression darkened. "You're not competition, Noemi. You're—" He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "What am I, Silas?" she asked softly. For a long moment he just looked at her, something powerful and unspoken in his eyes. Then slowly he reached out to touch her cheek. "You're the first person since my father died who makes Willow Haven feel like home," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're the most genuine, caring person I've ever met. You're—" He stepped closer, close enough that Nomi could feel the warmth of him, smell the subtle cologne he wore. "You're too good for me," he whispered, "but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway." And then, surrounded by orchids and the soft sound of water trickling in the greenhouse fountain, Silas Grant kissed her. Nomi had imagined this moment more times than she cared to admit, but the reality was better than any daydream. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, then more insistent as she responded. Her arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Silas rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "What took you so long?" Nomi smiled up at him. "Fear," he said honestly. "Fear that you wouldn't feel the same. Fear that you would." Before she could ask what he meant, the greenhouse door opened and a waiter appeared. "Mr. Grant, Mr. Anderson is looking for you. The toast is about to begin." Silas sighed, reluctantly stepping back from Nomi. "Tell him we'll be right there." As they prepared to return to the party, Silas took Nomi's hand again. "We're not done talking about this," he said, a promise in his voice that made her heart skip. "I'm counting on it," she replied. They rejoined the party just as Harold Anderson called for everyone's attention. Standing on the grand staircase, champagne in hand, he began a speech about community and tradition. Nomi only half listened, too aware of Silas beside her, his fingers still entwined with hers. Then Harold said something that caught her attention. "And we're especially delighted to have our Caroline back home," he announced, beaming at the blonde woman now standing beside him. "Not just for Christmas, but permanently. She's accepted a position at Anderson Development, heading up our new hospitality division." Nomi felt Silas stiffen beside her. Caroline was moving back? Permanently? "And who knows," Harold continued with a wink to the crowd. "Maybe now that she's home, certain old flames might rekindle. After all, it's the season of second chances." A ripple of knowing laughter went through the crowd. Nomi felt sick. From across the room, Caroline smiled directly at them, her expression triumphant. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Silas remained polite but distant with everyone, including Caroline, who made several attempts to engage him in private conversation. He never left Nomi's side, but she could feel him withdrawing emotionally, processing this unexpected development. On the drive home, snow began to fall again, heavy flakes that required Silas's full concentration on the winding roads. They didn't speak until they reached Willow Haven. As they sat in the parked truck, the engine ticking as it cooled, Nomi finally broke the silence. "Are you okay?" Silas stared through the windshield at the snow-covered farm. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I didn't expect to see her tonight. I certainly didn't expect to hear she's moving back." "Does it change things?" Nomi asked, afraid of the answer but needing to know. "Between us?" Silas turned to her then, his expression conflicted. "It shouldn't. But Caroline has a way of complicating everything she touches. Do you still have feelings for her?" The question hurt to ask, but Nomi had to understand where she stood. "No," Silas said firmly. "What I felt for Caroline died a long time ago." But what?" he sighed, running a hand over his face. "But she's part of this community in a way you're not yet. Her father is one of the most influential men in the county. Her family has connections to half the businesses we deal with. It's going to be complicated." The implication was clear. Caroline belonged in his world in a way Nomi didn't. The kiss in the greenhouse suddenly felt like a dream, real but fleeting. "I should go in," Nomi said, reaching for the door handle. "It's late, Nomi." Silas caught her hand. "What happened tonight in the greenhouse, and I meant it, all of it." She wanted to believe him, but the evening had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Seeing Caroline, beautiful, confident, connected. Caroline had awakened all her old insecurities. "I know," she said softly, "but maybe we should take some time to think. You have a lot to process with Caroline being back." Something like hurt flashed in Silas's eyes, but he nodded. "If that's what you want." "I don't know what I want," Nomi admitted. Except... She looked at him, this man who had come to mean so much to her in such a short time. Except not to be hurt again, and not to be someone's second choice. Before he could respond, she slipped out of the truck and hurried through the snow to her cottage. Inside, she leaned against the door, her heart pounding. The emerald dress suddenly felt too tight, too fancy, too much like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't. As she changed into her comfortable pajamas, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her was different from the one who had arrived at Willow Haven Farm 2 months ago. She stood straighter, looked more confident, but some things hadn't changed. She still didn't belong in Caroline's world. "What were you thinking?" she whispered to her reflection. "Fecunda, that a man like Silas Grant would choose you over someone like her?" Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Willow Haven in a blanket of white. Nomi stood at her window, watching as the lights in the main house went out one by one in the quay. Morning, she would have to face Silas and pretend that her heart wasn't breaking at the thought of losing him before she'd ever really had him. "You're stronger than this," she told herself firmly. "You survived before Willow Haven. You'll survive after." But as she climbed into bed, the memory of Silas's kiss lingered, along with his words. "You're too good for me, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway." If only she could believe that was still true. The week after the Anderson Christmas party was the most difficult Nomi had experienced at Willow Haven. She and Silas fell into an awkward dance of polite conversation and careful distance, both afraid to mention what had happened in the greenhouse or what Harold Anderson's announcement about Caroline's return might mean for their future. Nomi threw herself into her work, taking on extra tasks to avoid being alone with Silas. She told herself she was giving him space to sort out his feelings, but in truth she was protecting her own heart. One cold morning, as she was mucking out the horse stalls, Jose, one of the farmhands, approached her. "The boss is in a mood today," he warned. "Been snapping at everyone since sunrise." "What happened?" Nomi asked, leaning on her pitchfork. Jose shrugged. "Who knows, but Miguel says he saw a fancy car leaving early this morning. A woman was driving." Noemi's stomach twisted. Caroline. She tried to focus on her work, but the thought of Caroline visiting Silas, perhaps trying to rekindle their relationship, made her feel physically ill. By midday, she couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. She found Silas in the equipment barn, aggressively tuning up one of the tractors. Grease smudged his forearms, and a muscle worked in his jaw as he tightened a bolt with more force than necessary. "Jose says you're terrorizing the staff today," she said, aiming for a light tone. Silas glanced up, his expression softening slightly when he saw her. "I'm not terrorizing anyone, just busy." "Is everything okay?" Nomi stepped closer, watching his face carefully. "I heard you had a visitor this morning." His hand stilled on the wrench. "Caroline stopped by, unannounced." "I see." Nomi's voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "Any particular reason?" She wanted to talk about old times. Silas set down the wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. "And new beginnings, apparently." "And what did you say?" He looked at her then, his blue eyes intense. "I told her I wasn't interested." Then revisiting the past. Relief washed over Nomi, but she was careful not to show it. "That must have gone over well." "About as well as you'd expect." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Caroline isn't used to hearing no." "Is that why you're out here trying to break perfectly good equipment?" Silas chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Maybe." He hesitated, then added, "She's not why I'm upset, though." "No? No." He stepped closer to Nomi, close enough that she could smell the familiar scent of him beneath the engine oil. "I'm upset because for the past week you've been avoiding me, and I miss you." The simple honesty of his words took her breath away. "I'm right here," she said softly. "I haven't gone anywhere. Haven't you?" His voice was gentle but insistent. "Since the party, you've been different, distant." "I thought you needed space," Nomi admitted, "to figure things out. With Caroline being back, I don't need space. From you." Silas took another step closer. "What I need is to know where we stand. That night in the greenhouse when I kissed you, did I misread the situation?" "No." Nomi's voice was barely a whisper. "You didn't misread anything. Then why have you been pulling away?" She looked down at her hands, calloused now from farm work. Because I'm afraid. Of what? Of not being enough. The words came out in a rush. Caroline is beautiful and educated and connected. She fits into your world in a way I never will. When people saw us together at the party, they were surprised, and not in a good way. They were wondering what someone like you was doing with someone like me. Know me. Silas's voice was firm as he gently tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. I don't care what anyone thinks, and if you believe I would choose Caroline over you, then you don't know me at all. But no buts. He shook his head. I spent 3 years with Caroline, and in all that time she never once looked at this farm, at my home, the way you did the first day you arrived. She never stayed up all night with a sick calf or learned the names of every horse in the stable. She never made this place feel whole. Nomi's heart raced at his words, but old insecurities died hard. I'm just the farm help, Silas. I didn't even finish high school. What can I possibly offer someone like you? Silas's expression darkened. Is that what you think? That I see you as the help? I don't know what you see when you look at me, she admitted. For a long moment, Silas just stared at her, as if searching for the right words. Then, with deliberate movements, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. My father took this picture about a month before he died, he said, handing it to Naomi. The photo showed a younger Silas standing in front of the farmhouse, pride evident in his stance. Behind him, the farm looked different. Older equipment, fewer outbuildings, a sense of struggle rather than prosperity. He told me something that day that I've never forgotten, Silas continued. He said, son, someday you'll understand that the true measure of wealth isn't in bank accounts or fancy things. It's in finding a purpose that matters and people who see the value in it. He took the photo back, carefully returning it to his pocket. When I look at you, Naomi, I see someone who understands the value of what we do here. Someone who cares about this land as much as I do. Someone who makes me feel like the richest man alive just by the way she smiles when the first spring calves are born or when the apple trees bloom. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes at the raw emotion in his voice. Silas, let me finish, he said gently. I don't want Caroline. I don't want someone who sees Willow Haven as a quaint hobby or a stepping stone to something better. I want you, Noemi Vargas, with your big heart and your hard work and your absolute refusal to see how amazing you are. He stepped forward and took her hands in his. So please stop running from me. Stop telling yourself you're not good enough, because the truth is, every day I wonder what I did to deserve having you in my life. Naomi couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Instead, she closed the distance between them, standing on tiptoe to press her lips to his. Silas responded immediately, wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her slightly off the ground as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Does this mean you'll stop avoiding me? Naomi laughed softly. Yes, though you should know you have grease on your face now, and probably on mine too. Silas grinned, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his usually serious features. Worth it. The sound of a throat clearing interrupted their moment. They turned to find Jose standing awkwardly in the doorway. Sorry, boss, he said, clearly trying not to smile, but Mr. Anderson is here to see you, says it's important. Silas frowned. Harold Anderson? Yes, sir. He's waiting at the house. With a reluctant sigh, Silas released Naomi. We'll continue this conversation later, he promised, his eyes conveying more than his words. As they walked back to the main house, Silas kept Naomi close by his side, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. The simple gesture felt like a declaration. To anyone watching, they were clearly more than employer and employee. Harold Anderson was waiting in the living room, his imposing figure made more so by an expensive overcoat and the air of someone used to getting his way. When he saw them enter together, his eyebrows raised slightly. Silas, he greeted, extending his hand, and Miss Vargas. How nice to see you both again. Harold, Silas shook the offered hand. What brings you out to Willow Haven? Business, I'm afraid. Harold settled himself in an armchair without waiting for an invitation. Shall we speak privately? Silas's hand tightened slightly on Nomi's waist. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Nomi. Harold's expression was unreadable. As you wish. I've come with a proposition, one I think will interest you greatly. I'm listening. As you know, Anderson Development has been expanding our agricultural investments. We're looking to create a showcase organic farm for our new farm-to-table resort concept. He paused for effect. We want Willow Haven to be that showcase. Silas's expression didn't change. Meaning what exactly? Meaning we want to buy your farm, Silas. Harold leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the excitement of a businessman sensing a deal. For a very generous sum. You could name your price, within reason. The room fell silent. Nomi felt Silas stiffen beside her but didn't dare look at his face. Willow Haven isn't for sale, Silas said finally, his voice deceptively calm. Harold chuckled indulgently. Everyone has a price, son, and this offer would set you up for life. You could do anything you wanted. Travel, start a new business, buy a bigger property elsewhere. The answer is no, Harold. Silas's tone left no room for argument. This land has been in my family for 4 generations. It's not just real estate to me. Harold's friendly demeanor cooled. I was afraid you might say that. Caroline mentioned you were emotionally attached to the place. He stood, buttoning his coat. Think about it at least. The offer will remain open for 30 days. After that, he shrugged. Well, business is business. After Harold left, Silas remained standing in the center of the living room, his expression thunderous. What did he mean? Business is business? Nomi asked cautiously. It means if I don't sell willingly, he'll find another way to get what he wants. Silas ran a hand through his hair. Harold Anderson didn't build his empire by taking no for an answer, but he can't force you to sell, can he? Not directly. Silas paced the room. But he has influence with the bank that holds my equipment, loans with the county commissioner who approves my land use permits, with the co-op that buys most of our produce. The implications sank in. He could make things very difficult for Willow Haven. Yes. Silas stopped pacing and looked at her. But it doesn't matter. I'm not selling, not at any price. Nomi crossed to him, placing a hand on his arm. We'll figure it out together. The fierce look of determination in his eyes softened as he covered her hand with his own. Together, he agreed. In the days that followed, Silas and Nomi settled into a new rhythm, still working side by side as before, but now with stolen kisses in the barn, hands that found each other as they walked the property, and evenings spent talking late into the night by the fireplace. They kept their relationship private at first, not out of shame, but because what was growing between them felt too precious to expose to outside scrutiny. Martha, of course, noticed immediately, her knowing smiles following them around the farm. About time, was all she said when she caught them holding hands in the kitchen one morning. The threat from Harold Anderson lingered in the background. But as Christmas approached, Willow Haven was busy with end-of-year tasks and holiday preparations. Silas asked Nomi to help him decorate the main house, something he admitted he hadn't bothered with since his father died. Together, they hung garlands and set up a Christmas tree in the living room, Silas lifting Nomi to place the star on top. The simple domestic activity felt significant, as if they were creating something new together, new traditions for a shared future. One evening, a week before Christmas, Silas suggested they have dinner in town. There's a new restaurant I've been meaning to try, he said casually, though something in his manner suggested it was more than a simple dinner invitation. Nomi wore a simple dress Martha had helped her shop for, and Silas put on a button-down shirt and sport coat. As they drove into town, snow beginning to fall lightly, Nomi felt a sense of rightness that had been missing from her life for as long as she could remember. The restaurant was small but elegant, with white tablecloths and candles flickering on each table. The hostess led them to a quiet corner booth, and Silas ordered a bottle of wine. "This is fancy for a Tuesday night," Nomi remarked, looking around appreciatively. "Special occasion," Silas replied, a hint of nervousness in his smile. Before Nomi could ask what he meant, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Caroline stood beside their table, looking immaculate in a designer dress, her blonde hair swept into a perfect updo. Beside her, Rebecca Anderson smirked, her eyes traveling over Nomi's simple dress with barely concealed disdain. Caroline, Rebecca. Silas's voice was cool but polite. Enjoying your evening? Immensely, Caroline replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. Though I must say, I'm surprised to see you here, Silas. You always said you hated pretentious restaurants. I said a lot of things when we were together, Silas replied evenly, many of which I've reconsidered. Caroline's perfect composure slipped for just a second. Clearly, her gaze shifted to Nomi. How lovely to see you again, Miss Vargas. Still, working at Willowhaven? The emphasis on working wasn't lost on Nomi. I am, though my role has expanded recently. Silas's hand found hers on the table, a public declaration that made Caroline's eyes narrow. How nice for you, she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Well, we won't keep you from your dinner. Oh, but Silas, Daddy wanted me to remind you that his offer has a time limit. Tick-tock. With that parting shot, she and Rebecca moved to a table across the restaurant, where they immediately began talking in low voices, glancing occasionally in their direction. I'm sorry about that, Silas said once they were alone. I should have expected they might be here. It's okay, Nomi assured him. I'm not going to let them ruin our evening. Silas squeezed her hand. Have I told you lately how amazing you are? The dinner proceeded pleasantly, despite the occasional glances from Caroline's table. The food was delicious, and the wine helped Nomi relax and forget about their unwelcome audience. As they were finishing dessert, Silas grew uncharacteristically quiet, a distant look in his eyes. Is something wrong? Nomi asked. No. He smiled, though it seemed forced. Everything's fine. But as they drove home through the gently falling snow, Silas remained preoccupied. Nomi didn't press him, assuming he was troubled by Caroline's reminder about Harold's offer. When they reached the farm, Silas parked but made no move to get out of the truck. There's something I need to tell you, he said finally, his voice serious. Something I should have told you before. Nomi's heart sank. Whatever was coming, it didn't sound good. What is it? Silas took a deep breath. 10 years ago, my father took out a large loan to modernize the farm. When he died, I inherited that debt along with the property. I've been making payments, but it's been tight, especially after investing in new equipment. Okay, Nomi said cautiously. Is the farm in financial trouble? Not exactly, but Harold Anderson's offer comes at a time when... He trailed off, clearly struggling with his words. The truth is, Nomi, Willowhaven isn't as financially secure as everyone thinks. The young millionaire farmer image is mostly smoke and mirrors. Why are you telling me this now? Silas turned to face her fully. Because I need you to understand that what I feel for you has nothing to do with Willowhaven's finances or Harold's offer. I don't want you to think that I... He stopped, frustrated. This is coming out all wrong. Silas, Nomi said gently, just tell me what's bothering you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Nomi's breath caught in her throat. I had this whole evening planned, he said ruefully. Dinner, wine, the perfect moment. Then Caroline showed up and reminded me of Harold's offer, and I realized you might think... He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. I need you to know that this isn't about money or the farm or Harold Anderson. This is about us. Nomi stared at the ring, unable to process what was happening. Silas, what are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Nomi Vargas. His voice was steady now, certain. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood in the rain and told me you weren't qualified enough for the job. I love your kindness, your strength, the way you care about everything and everyone around you. I love the way you've made Willowhaven feel like home again. He took the ring from the box. I know it's fast, I know people will talk, but I don't care. I want to spend my life with you, whether that's here at Willowhaven or somewhere else entirely. The farm is my heritage, but you're my future. Tears filled Nomi's eyes. Are you asking me to marry you? Yes, Silas said simply. Will you? 1,000 thoughts raced through Nomi's mind. How quickly everything had happened, what people would say, whether she was ready for such a commitment. But beneath all those thoughts was a certainty she couldn't ignore. She loved Silas Grant with every fiber of her being. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, I'll marry you." Silas's face broke into a smile of such pure joy that it took her breath away. With slightly trembling hands, he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I love you," she said, the words feeling both new and familiar on her tongue. "I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone stubborn and moody who works." "Too much?" he teased, pulling her close. "Someone who sees me," she corrected softly. "Really sees me." Their kiss was a promise, sealed in the quiet cab of the truck as snow continued to fall around them, transforming Willow Haven into a winter wonderland. News of their engagement spread through the small town like wildfire. Most people were surprised, but supportive, offering congratulations when they saw Nomi and Silas together. Martha was ecstatic, immediately offering to help plan what she called the wedding of the century. "Nothing too fancy," Nomi insisted. "Something simple here at the farm." "In the spring," Silas suggested, "when the apple trees are in bloom." The prospect of a spring wedding gave them something positive to focus on as they faced Harold Anderson's deadline. 2 weeks after his visit, they received formal notice from the bank that one of Willow Haven's equipment loans was being called for review. "It's starting," Silas said grimly, setting the letter aside. "Harold's flexing his muscles." "What does it mean?" Nomi asked, worry creasing her brow. "It means they're looking for reasons to raise our interest rate or call in the loan completely." Silas rubbed his temples. "If they do that, we'll have to either sell equipment or find new financing quickly." The stress took its toll on both of them. Silas worked longer hours, pushing himself to increase the farm's productivity despite the winter season. Nomi took on more of the administrative tasks, reviewing finances and looking for ways to cut costs without compromising the farm's operations. Through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their shared commitment to fighting for Willow Haven's future. Each night, no matter how exhausted they were, they made time to talk about wedding plans or simply hold each other, reaffirming what they were fighting for. A week before Harold's deadline expired, Nomi was in town picking up supplies when she literally bumped into Rebecca Anderson outside the hardware store. "Oh, I'm sorry," Nomi apologized, steadying the shopping bags Rebecca had nearly dropped. "No harm done," Rebecca replied coolly, her eyes immediately going to the engagement ring on Nomi's left hand. "I see congratulations are in order." "Thank you," Nomi said cautiously. Rebecca studied her for a moment, then sighed. "Look, I'm not my cousin. I don't have some vendetta against you because you managed to land Silas Grant." "I didn't land anyone," Nomi replied, keeping her voice level. "Silas and I fell in love." Her surprise, Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "I believe you, which is why I'm going to tell you something." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "My father isn't just after Willow Haven for its agricultural potential. There's a reason he wants that specific property." "What do you mean?" "The county is planning a major highway expansion that would run right along the western edge of Willow Haven. Land values in that corridor are about to skyrocket." Rebecca's expression was serious. "My father found out through his connections on the Planning Commission. The announcement won't be made public until next month." Nomi's mind raced. "So if Silas sells now, he'd be giving away the farm for a fraction of what it will be worth in 6 months." Rebecca nodded. "And my father knows it. Why are you telling me this?" Rebecca adjusted her designer scarf, looking uncomfortable. "Because whatever Caroline might think, I don't actually enjoy watching my father destroy people's lives for profit. And because..." She hesitated. "Because Silas was always decent to me, even when Caroline was horrible to him. He deserves better." "Thank you," Nomi said sincerely. "But why not tell Silas directly?" "Would he have believed me?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Besides, my father would disown me if he knew I was interfering in his business dealings. This conversation never happened." With that, she walked away, leaving Nomi standing on the sidewalk with information that could change everything. When she returned to Willow Haven, Nomi found Silas in his office, surrounded by financial statements and looking more stressed than she'd ever seen him. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. She told him everything Rebecca had shared, watching as disbelief turned to anger on his face. "That manipulative bastard," Silas growled when she finished. "He's been playing me this whole time. The question is, what do we do now?" Nomi perched on the edge of his desk. "If what Rebecca said is true, we just need to hold on until the highway announcement." Silas leaned back in his chair, thinking. "We can manage that, I think. The bank review is proceeding, but our finances are in order. They won't find a legitimate reason to call in the loan. And once the highway plans are public," Nomi began. "We'll be in a much stronger position," Silas finished. "We might even be able to sell a small portion of the western acreage at a premium while keeping the heart of the farm intact." For the first time in weeks, hope returned to his eyes. He pulled Nomi into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "Have I told you lately that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me?" She kissed him softly. "Even better than that new tractor you bought last summer." "Even better than that," he agreed with a smile, "though it's a close call." They spent the evening making plans, a new energy flowing between them. With the information Rebecca had provided, they could see a path forward, one that would allow them to keep Willow Haven and maybe even expand its operations. As they sat together on the porch swing, watching stars appear in the clear winter sky, Nomi felt a deep contentment settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "I was thinking," Silas said, his arm warm around her shoulders, "maybe we should move the wedding up." "Oh?" Nomi looked up at him. "Why?" "Because I don't want to wait until spring to call you my wife." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And because I want Harold Anderson to know exactly what he's up against. Both of us united, fighting for our home." "I like the sound of that," Nomi said, snuggling closer. "Our home. It always has been," Silas murmured. "From the moment you arrived. I just didn't realize it until you showed me." As the night deepened around them, Willow Haven stood silent and strong, a testament to 4 generations of Grant family determination. And now, with Nomi by his side, Silas knew the farm's future was brighter than ever. What neither of them realized was that Harold Anderson was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. And Caroline, wounded by Silas's rejection and Nomi's triumph, was not above seeking revenge. The battle for Willow Haven was far from over. January arrived with biting cold and fierce winds that whistled through the bare trees of Willow Haven Farm. Despite the harsh weather, Nomi and Silas found warmth in their plans for both the farm's future and their upcoming wedding. They had decided on a Valentine's Day ceremony, small and intimate, with only their closest friends in attendance. Martha had taken charge of the arrangements, turning the wedding planning into a welcome distraction from Harold Anderson's looming deadline. "Nothing too fancy," Nomi reminded her for the 10th time as they reviewed floral options in the farmhouse. "Kitchen. Honey, it's your wedding day," Martha replied, pushing a catalogue of elaborate centerpieces toward her. "A little fancy won't hurt you." Silas, passing through with a mug of coffee, chuckled at their ongoing debate. "I think I'll leave this in your capable hands," he said, dropping a kiss on Nomi's head before heading out to check on the livestock. Nomi watched him go, still marveling sometimes that this was her life now. A home, a future, a man who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. "You too," Martha said with a satisfied smile. "I haven't seen Silas this happy since before his father passed." "He makes me happy too," Nomi admitted. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." Martha patted her hand. "That's how it should be, dear. Now, about these flowers." Their peaceful morning was interrupted by the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. Nomi looked out the window to see a sleek black car pulling up to the house. Her stomach tightened when she recognized Harold Anderson at the wheel, with Caroline in the passenger seat. "We have company," she told Martha, who frowned at the news. "Want me to stay?" the older woman offered. "No, it's okay. I can handle this." Nomi squared her shoulders. "Would you mind finding Silas, though? Tell him Harold and Caroline are here." By the time she reached the front door, Harold was already on the porch, his expensive overcoat buttoned against the January chill. Caroline stood slightly behind him, a smug smile playing at her lips. "Miss Vargas," Harold greeted her, his tone falsely warm. "Is Silas available? We have some business to discuss." "He's out checking the livestock," Nomi replied, not inviting them in. "I've sent Martha to find him." "Wonderful." Harold made to step past her into the house, but Nomi held her ground. "You can wait here on the porch," she said firmly, "or in your car if you're cold." Caroline's eyes narrowed at the rebuff, but Harold merely chuckled. "Protective of your territory already, I see. Well, that's understandable." "Willow Haven isn't territory, Mr. Anderson. It's our home." "For now," Caroline murmured, just loud, enough to be heard. Before Nomi could respond, Silas appeared, striding purposefully from the direction of the barns. His expression was guarded as he approached the porch. "Harold, Caroline," he nodded curtly. "This is unexpected. We thought we'd save you a trip to town," Harold said smoothly. "Today is the deadline for our offer, as you know." "I know." Silas moved to stand beside Nomi, his shoulder touching hers in a silent show of unity. "And my answer hasn't changed. Willow Haven is not for sale." Harold's friendly demeanor faded. "I was afraid you might say that, which is why I brought something that might change your mind." He reached into his coat and produced an official-looking envelope. "This arrived at my office this morning. I thought you should see it immediately." Silas took the envelope, his expression wary. As he read the contents, his face paled slightly. "What is it?" Nomi asked, concern rising in her voice. "It's from the bank," Silas said, his voice tight. "They're calling in our largest equipment loan. Full payment due in 30 days. Harold nodded sympathetically. "Terrible timing, isn't it? Right in the middle of winter, when your cash flow is at its lowest." "You did this," Nomi accused, anger flaring. "You pulled strings at the bank." "I did nothing of the sort," Harold replied calmly, "but I do sit on the board of First National, and we've been reviewing high-risk agricultural loans. It's just business, my dear." "It's manipulation," Silas countered, his voice hard. "And it won't work." "Won't it?" Harold raised an eyebrow. "That loan is for nearly $200,000, Silas. Do you have that kind of cash on hand in January?" When Silas didn't respond, Harold continued, his voice taking on a more conciliatory tone. "Look, I'm not trying to ruin you. In fact, I'm offering a solution. Sell Willow Haven to Anderson Development, and all your financial worries disappear. You'll walk away with enough money to start fresh anywhere you want." "And if I refuse?" "Then you have 30 days to find $200,000, Harold shrugged, "or watch the bank repossess your equipment. Without equipment, you can't work the farm. Without working the farm, you default on your property loans. It's a downward spiral I'd hate to see you caught in." Nomi felt sick. Despite the information Rebecca had shared about the highway project, they hadn't anticipated such an aggressive move. They needed time they suddenly didn't have. "We'll need to discuss this," Silas said finally, his voice betraying none of the turmoil Nomi knew he must be feeling. "Of course," Harold nodded as if he were being reasonable. "You have my number, but don't wait too long. Once the bank starts repossession proceedings, even I won't be able to stop them." As they turned to leave, Caroline lingered, her cold eyes fixed on Nomi. "I told you he'd choose the farm in the end," she said softly. "He always does." "He's not choosing anything," Nomi replied steadily. "We're facing this together." Caroline's perfect smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see." After they drove away, Silas and Nomi stood on the porch in silence, the bank letter like a physical weight between them. "Let's go inside," Silas said finally. "We need to look at the numbers." The rest of the day was spent in Silas's office, reviewing accounts and calling their regular bank to see if they could secure emergency financing. The news wasn't good. With winter tightening its grip and farm income at its seasonal low, no bank was willing to extend the credit they needed on such short notice. By evening, Nomi could see the toll the stress was taking on Silas. His shoulders were tense, his expression distant as he stared at columns of figures that refused to add up to a solution. "We'll find a way," she said, massaging his shoulders as he sat at his desk. "Maybe we could sell some land, just a small parcel on the western edge." Without the highway announcement, we'd get a fraction of what it's worth, Silas sighed. And we can't hold out for 6 months when the loan is due in 30 days. What about borrowing from someone? Martha mentioned you have an uncle in Colorado. Silas shook his head. Uncle Frank doesn't have that kind of money, and I won't put the farm at risk by borrowing from friends. Nomi bit her lip, thinking, What if we accept Harold's offer, but with conditions? We could sell him just the western portion, the part that would benefit from the highway. He doesn't want part of Willow Haven, Silas said grimly. He wants all of it, and once he has a foothold, he'll keep pushing until there's nothing left. The defeat in his voice scared Nomi more than Harold's threats. She knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. Listen to me, Silas Grant. Your family didn't build this farm over 4 generations by giving up when things got tough. We are not losing Willow Haven. Not to Harold Anderson, not to anyone. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We? Yes, we. She squeezed his hands. This is my fight too now. He pulled her onto his lap, holding her close as if drawing strength from her presence. What did I do to deserve you? He murmured into her hair. You saw me, she said simply, when no one else did. They sat together in the quiet office, the warmth of their embrace a stark contrast to the cold reality of the papers spread across the desk. Whatever happened next, they would face it as one. The next morning, Nomi woke early, her mind still churning with possible solutions to their financial crisis. Silas was already up, his side of the bed cold. She found him in the kitchen, staring out at the farm as dawn painted the snow-covered fields in shades of pink and gold. You should have woken me, she said, pouring herself a cup of the coffee he'd made. You needed the rest. He turned from the window, his expression calmer than it had been the night before. I've been thinking about what matters most. He took her free hand. Nomi, I meant what I said when I proposed. You are my future. Willow Haven is important to me, but not as important as you are. A knot of dread formed in her stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we should consider Harold's offer. He held up a hand to stop her protest. Not because I want to, but because fighting him could cost us everything. If we sell now, we walk away with enough to start over somewhere else. Silas, no. Nomi set down her coffee cup. This farm is your heritage. I won't let you give that up for me. It's just land, he insisted, though she could see in his eyes that he didn't really believe that. We could buy another farm, maybe somewhere smaller, more manageable. It's not just land, she countered. It's your family's legacy. It's where your father taught you everything important, remember? It's where we found each other. And I won't let Harold Anderson take that from us just because he wants to profit from a highway project. Silas stared at her, surprise evident in his expression. How did you know about the highway? Too late, Nomi realized she hadn't told him the full conversation with Rebecca. Rebecca mentioned it might be why her father was so interested in the western acreage. When I ran into her in town. Nomi shifted uncomfortably. I didn't think it mattered exactly why Harold wanted the land, just that he did. Silas's eyes narrowed. What else did Rebecca say? Reluctantly, Nomi recounted the entire conversation, including Rebecca's warning about her father's ruthlessness and her belief that Caroline was involved in his plans. So that's how they knew which loan to target, Silas said when she finished. Caroline knows our finances. She used to help with the bookkeeping when we were together. The betrayal in his voice made Nomi's heart ache for him. I'm sorry, I should have told you everything. It's not your fault. He shook his head. But it does explain why Harold is moving so aggressively. If the highway announcement comes before he secures the land, we'd be in a position to name our price, Nomi finished. Which is why we can't give up now. We just need to find a way to hold on until the announcement. Silas began to pace the kitchen, his mind clearly racing. Even if we sold every non-essential piece of equipment, we wouldn't come close to 200,000. What about a private investor? Nomi suggested. Someone who could loan us the money until after the highway announcement, when we could either repay them with interest or offer them a share of the increased land value. Who would take that risk? Someone who believes in Willow Haven. Someone who understands what this place means. An idea began to form in Noemi's mind. What about the other farmers in the county? Wouldn't they want to stop Harold Anderson from taking over more agricultural land? Silas considered this. Maybe, but coordinating something like that would take time we don't have. Then we need to buy time. Nomi's determination grew with each word. What if we went public with what Harold is doing? Exposed his manipulation of the bank and his insider knowledge of the highway project? It would be our word against his, Silas pointed out. Unless what? A slow smile spread across Silas's face. Unless we had proof, and I think I know where to get it. That afternoon, they drove into town to meet with Bill Edwards, editor of the local newspaper and an old friend of Silas's. Father? Bill listened intently as they explained Harold Anderson's tactics and the highway project that was driving his interest in Willow Haven. That's quite an accusation, Bill said when they finished. Harold Anderson is a powerful man in this county. It's the truth, Silas insisted. But you're right, we need proof. That's where you come in. Me? Bill raised an eyebrow. You have contacts at the county planning office, Silas explained. We need confirmation of the highway project and, if possible, records of who knew about it and when. Bill stroked his grey beard thoughtfully. I might be able to get that information. As a matter of public interest, you understand. And while you're doing that, Noemi added, we need your help with something else. They outlined their plan, a community meeting at Willow Haven, bringing together local farmers and business owners who might be affected by Harold's expanding influence. The newspaper would announce it as an informational session about agricultural financing, but its true purpose would be to rally support and potentially find investors willing to help Willow Haven weather the crisis. It's risky, Bill warned. If Harold gets wind of this before you have proof, we know, Silas acknowledged, but we're out of options. After leaving the newspaper office, they spent the rest of the day making calls and arrangements. Martha activated her extensive network of contacts, ensuring word would spread to the right people. Jose and Miguel volunteered to prepare the barn for the meeting, clearing space and setting up heaters to combat the January cold. As they worked side by side, Noemi was struck by how many people were willing to help once they understood what was at stake. Willow Haven wasn't just Silas's heritage, it was part of the community's fabric. The night before the meeting, as they lay in bed, Silas pulled Noemi close. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said softly, I want you to know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Whether we save the farm or not, I found something more valuable. Nomi's throat tightened with emotion. We're going to save it, she whispered. I promise. But as she drifted off to sleep, doubt crept in. What if their plan failed? What if Harold Anderson was too powerful, his influence too pervasive? What if, after everything, they lost the home they'd fought so hard to protect? The day of the community meeting dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to promise better things ahead. By mid-afternoon, cars and trucks lined the driveway of Willow Haven as farmers, shopkeepers, and long-time residents of the county gathered in the main barn. Silas stood at the entrance, greeting each arrival personally. Noemi moved through the growing crowd, offering hot coffee and making introductions. The atmosphere was curious but supportive. These were people who had known the Grant family for generations, who understood the value of keeping family farms intact. Just as they were about to begin, Bill Edwards arrived, a manila envelope clutched in his hand. His expression told Noemi he had news. We need to talk, he said in a low voice, pulling her and Silas aside. I got the information you wanted. The highway project is real. It's been in planning for months, and Harold Anderson has been in every closed-door meeting about it. So he did know, Silas confirmed. Not only knew, Bill continued, but has been buying up properties along the proposed route through shell companies. He's positioning himself to control most of the commercial development once the project is announced. That's why he wants Willow Haven so badly, Noemi realized. It's the biggest property on the Western Corridor. Exactly. Bill handed over the envelope. It's all in here, meeting minutes, property records, even emails between Harold and members of the Planning Commission. My source risked a lot to get this. Thank you, Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. "This could change everything." "There's one more thing you should know," Bill added grimly. "Harold Anderson is on his way here. One of his people must have tipped him off about the meeting." No sooner had the words left his mouth than a commotion at the barn entrance caught their attention. Harold Anderson strode in, flanked by Caroline and two men in suits who looked like lawyers. His face was a mask of contained fury. "What exactly is going on here, Silas?" he demanded loudly, drawing the attention of the entire gathering. "Some kind of agricultural summit you forgot to invite me to?" Silas handed the envelope to Nomi and stepped forward to face Harold. "Actually, it's a community discussion about the future of family farms in this county. Something I thought might interest our neighbors. How touching." Harold's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And does this discussion include mention of your financial troubles, or the fact that you're about to lose your equipment to the bank?" A murmur went through the crowd. Harold smiled, sensing an advantage. "That's right, folks. Willow Haven isn't the success story Silas wants you to believe. It's drowning in debt. That's why I've generously offered to buy the property, to save the Grant family from complete financial ruin." "Generous?" Nomi stepped forward, clutching the envelope. "Is that what you call using insider information about a highway project? To pressure Silas into selling his land for a fraction of what it will be worth?" Harold's confident expression faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you?" Nomi turned to address the crowd. "Mr. Anderson has known for months that the county is planning a major highway expansion along the western edge of Willow Haven. Land values in that corridor will skyrocket once the announcement is made public next month. But he doesn't want to pay what the land will be worth then. He wants to steal it now, using his influence at the bank to force a distress sale." Caroline stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "That's ridiculous. You have no proof of any highway project." "Actually, we do." Silas took the envelope from Nomi and held it up. "Meeting minutes, property records, emails, all showing that Harold has been positioning himself to profit from information that wasn't available to the public." "Let me see that," one of the lawyers demanded, reaching for the envelope. "I don't think so," Bill Edwards interjected, stepping between them. "Those documents are now in the possession of the County Chronicle. We'll be running a special edition tomorrow detailing Mr. Anderson's activities." Harold's face darkened. "You're making a serious mistake, Edwards. My lawyers will shut down your little paper before that edition ever goes to print." "Maybe," Bill agreed calmly. "But copies have already been sent to the State Attorney General's office and the Ethics Commission. You can't silence everyone, Harold." A heavy silence fell over the barn. Harold looked around, seeming to realize for the first time how many people were watching. Farmers, business owners, community leaders. People whose respect he had courted for years. "This is absurd," he blustered, but with less conviction. "I've done nothing illegal." "Perhaps not," said an elderly man whom Nomi recognized as Judge Thompson, retired from the county court. "But using inside information for personal gain while serving on a public commission, that's an ethics violation at minimum. And leveraging your position at the bank to pressure a sale, that won't play well in the court of public opinion." Harold's confident facade cracked further. "This is a private business matter between myself and Silas." "Not anymore," Silas replied. "Not when you're trying to dismantle a farm that's been in my family for 4 generations. Not when your actions threaten every independent farmer in this county." Murmurs of agreement rose from the assembled crowd. Harold's gaze darted around, measuring his suddenly precarious position. "We should go," one of the lawyers muttered, tugging at Harold's sleeve. "We need to review those documents before responding." Harold shook off the lawyer's hand, his eyes fixed on Silas. "This isn't over, Grant, not by a long shot." "Actually, I think it is," came a voice from the barn entrance. Everyone turned to see Rebecca Anderson walking toward them, a leather portfolio clutched in her hands. Caroline's eyes widened in shock. "Rebecca? What are you doing here?" "The right thing for once." Rebecca moved to stand beside Silas and Nomi. "Hello, Daddy. Surprised to see me?" Harold stared at his daughter. "Rebecca, whatever you're thinking of doing, it's already done." She opened the portfolio and extracted a check, which she handed to Silas. $200,000, enough to pay off the equipment loan in full. Silas looked at the check, in disbelief. "Rebecca, I can't accept this." "You can and you will," she insisted. "Consider it an investment. Once the highway project is announced, you can either buy me out with interest or we can discuss a partnership. My business degree has to be good for something besides helping my father manipulate people." Harold's face had gone from red to white. "You're investing in Willow Haven? Against me?" "I'm investing in decency," Rebecca replied, meeting her father's gaze steadily. "Something you taught me the value of before profit became your only concern." Caroline stepped forward, her expression incredulous. "You can't be serious, Becca. They're nobody. Farm help and a dirt farmer." "That farm help has more integrity than you've ever shown," Rebecca shot back. "And that dirt farmer is building something real, not just acquiring things to fill some emptiness inside." A stunned silence fell over the barn. Then from the back someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the space. Harold Anderson looked around at the community united against him, at his daughter standing with his opponents, and made a strategic retreat. "This isn't the end of this discussion," he said to Rebecca. "We'll continue it at home." "I don't live at home anymore," she replied calmly. "I moved my things out this morning. I'll be staying at the Willow Creek Inn until I find a place of my own." Harold's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. With a curt nod to his lawyers, he turned and strode from the barn, Caroline hurrying after him with one last venomous glance at Nomi. As the door closed behind them, the tension in the barn broke. People surged forward, surrounding Silas, Nomi, and Rebecca with congratulations and support. Bill Edwards was already on his phone, dictating the front-page story for tomorrow's paper. Judge Thompson was examining the documents, nodding in satisfaction at what he found. In the midst of the commotion, Silas pulled Nomi aside, his eyes bright with emotion. "I can't believe what just happened," he said, still holding Rebecca's check. "Everything changed in an instant." "Because you fought for what matters," Nomi replied, squeezing his hand. "And because you weren't fighting alone." He looked around, at the barn full of neighbors and friends, then back at Nomi. "I never will be again, will I?" "Never," she promised. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity at Willow Haven. With Rebecca's check, they paid off the equipment loan, removing Harold's leverage over the farm. Bill's exposé in the Bee. County Chronicle forced the Planning Commission to make the highway project public earlier than intended, confirming everything they had claimed. Harold Anderson resigned from the Bank Board and the Planning Commission, citing personal reasons. Caroline left town again, reportedly taking a job in Chicago. The community rallied around Willow Haven, with local businesses offering discounts on supplies and neighboring farmers volunteering help with winter maintenance. Through it all, Nomi and Silas grew closer, their bond strengthened by the crisis they had weathered together. Wedding plans continued, with Martha insisting on a few fancy touches that Nomi pretended to protest, but secretly loved. Rebecca proved to be an unexpected ally, her business acumen and connections helping Silas develop a strategic plan for Willow Haven's future. They decided to sell a small portion of the western acreage once the highway project began, using the proceeds to update the farm's infrastructure and expand into organic specialty crops. Valentine's Day dawned clear and cold, the farm blanketed in fresh snow that sparkled in the morning sunlight. In the main house, Martha fussed over Nomi as she prepared for the ceremony. "You look beautiful, dear," the older woman said, tears in her eyes as she adjusted the simple white dress they had found in a boutique in town. "Silas won't know what hit him." "Is everyone here?" Nomi asked nervously, peering out the window at the cars lining the driveway. "Just about. Jose and Miguel are showing people to the barn." Martha had overseen the transformation of the main barn into a wedding venue with white twinkle lights, garlands of evergreens and heaters ensuring everyone's comfort, despite the February cold. "And Silas," Martha smiled knowingly. Pacing in his office, according to Bill, nervous as a cat. That made Nomi feel better. Her own stomach was a tangle of butterflies, not from doubt, but from the magnitude of the step she was about to take. 6 months ago, she had arrived at Willow Haven in the rain, clutching a smudged resume and carrying the weight of a lifetime of being told she wasn't good enough. Today, She was marrying the man she loved, surrounded by people who had become family. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Rebecca entered, elegant in a deep blue dress. "The minister says they're ready whenever you are," she announced. "And Silas looks like he might wear a hole in the floor if you make him wait much longer." Nomi laughed, the sound relaxing her tense shoulders. "We can't have that. The floors in this house are original." Martha handed her the simple bouquet of winter roses and greenery. "Ready, my dear." "Ready," Nomi confirmed, taking a deep breath. The walk from the main house to the barn was short but magical, the path lined with lanterns that glowed warmly against the snow. Jose waited at the barn door, handsome in a suit and tie, ready to walk Nomi down the aisle in place of the father she had lost so many years ago. "You look beautiful, Miss Nomi," he said with a shy smile, offering his arm. Inside, the barn had been transformed. Rows of chairs faced a simple arch, decorated with evergreens and white roses. Soft music played as guests turned to watch her entrance, but Nomi saw only one person, Silas, standing tall and handsome in a dark suit, his eyes finding hers across the space between them. The love in his gaze took her breath away. This man, who had once seemed so distant and guarded, now looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to support each other through whatever challenges life brought, to nurture the love that had grown between them against all odds. "I never believed in fairy tales," Nomi said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened. "I never thought someone would look at me and see past all my shortcomings. But you did, Silas. You saw me when I couldn't even see myself. You made me believe I was good enough, not just for the job, but for a life I never dared to dream of." Silas took her hands in his blue eyes intense with emotion. "Nomi, from the moment you arrived at Willow Haven, something changed. This land, which had always been my responsibility, my burden, became something more. You brought light back to places that had been dark for too long. You reminded me what it means to care, to hope, to love." He smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his face. "You were wrong that first day, you know. You're not just good enough for the job, you're too good for me. But I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway, for as long as you'll have me." "Forever," Nomi whispered, as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "That's how long I'll have you." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the barn erupted in cheers and applause. Silas pulled Nomi into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. The celebration that followed was everything Nomi could have wished for, warm, joyful, filled with laughter and good food and friends who had become family. Martha had outdone herself with the decorations, and Jose's wife had prepared a feast that everyone raved about. As evening fell, Silas led Nomi outside for a moment of quiet amid the festivities. Snow had begun to fall again, large flakes drifting lazily through the lantern light. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "More than I knew was possible," she replied, leaning into his warmth. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the snow transform Willow Haven once more. In the distance, the lights of the barn glowed invitingly, the sounds of celebration carrying through the crisp air. "You know," Silas said thoughtfully, "my father used to say that the true measure of wealth isn't in bank accounts or fancy things. It's in finding a purpose that matters, and people who see the value in it," Nomi finished, remembering his words from months ago. Silas smiled down at her. "I think he would have loved you. I think I would have loved him too." She rested her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for bringing me here that day, for giving me a chance when most people wouldn't have." "Thank you for staying," he replied simply, "for fighting for this place, for us when it would have been easier to walk away." "I could never walk away from you," Nomi said. "You're stuck with me now, Silas Grant, for better or worse." "Definitely for better," he murmured, bending to kiss her as snow continued to fall around them, blanketing Willow Haven Farm in a pristine layer of white, nature's way of marking a fresh start, a clean slate, a new beginning for the land and the people who called it home. Inside the barn, their friends waited to continue the celebration. Soon they would rejoin them, sharing in the warmth and joy of the community that had rallied around them in their time of need. But for now, this moment belonged to just the two of them. A farmer and the woman who had arrived on his doorstep, believing she wasn't good enough, only to discover that she was exactly what he had been waiting for all along. "I love you, Mrs. Grant," Silas whispered against her hair. "I love you too," Nomi replied, her heart full to bursting with the perfect happiness of this moment, this man, this life they would build together at Willowhaven Farm. As they turned to walk back to their wedding celebration, hand in hand, the farmhouse stood strong behind them, its lights glowing warmly against the falling snow, a beacon of home, of heritage, of love that had been tested and had emerged stronger for the challenge. And Nomi knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found where she belonged. The end.